Episode 123, Resolution 3. Night arrived. The Eastern forces and the jackdaws, who hurriedly moved in the daytime, settled down in different places at night. The jackdaws built their camp on the Snow Breeze Plain. After the unit that left late joined them, they built a fence, set up camps, and tightened the security. The Eastern forces returned to their camps. The Western forces had already been defeated, but their tension did not completely disappear. Because the other was present. Because they were wary of each other. For the jackdaws, they were in enemy territory. For the Eastern forces, the jackdaws were their longtime enemies. Water and oil. Two groups that couldn't be mixed together. It was impossible to conciliate the two groups with just one fight when they had fought countless times before. But they can't keep fighting. Jude nodded at Cordelia's words. Yes, it's better if they part ways without a fight for this time at least, for both sides. The two were talking inside the Eastern forces camp, and not the jackdaws' camp. They did that for political reasons, but to put it bluntly, it was as follows. Jude and Cordelia were from the north. So when the northerners arrived, they should move their lodgings to the northerners' camp. After all, the two were undeniably northerners. But the fight with the Western forces had left the Eastern forces greatly exhausted. So if Jude and Cordelia were on the Northern Army's camp, what would happen if the Northern Army attacked at night? Would they be able to stop it? In other words, such a situation would instigate fear, tension, and so on. On the other hand, if Jude and Cordelia stayed in the Eastern forces camp, the following psychological effects would happen. Jude and Cordelia were also the guardians of the wild lands. If the two were on this side, the Northern Army would not be able to easily attack. The two were children of highly respectable families in the north. In a way, no, frankly speaking, they were viewed as hostages, but that was unavoidable. It was unavoidable if one thought about the relationship between the north and the wild lands. Returning to the Northern Army's camp would naturally irritate the Eastern forces, while staying in the Eastern forces camp would irritate the jackdaws, but things were different if one took a step back. The Eastern forces can't attack the jackdaws. They incurred a lot of damage, so it wouldn't happen. Moreover, those who were gathered here today were not the elite troops of the East. This was the result of recruiting as many people as possible who could fight in order to increase their numbers. Would they take another risk in this situation? At a time when a lot of people had already died and countless homes had been destroyed. There are the wild gods too. They were gods one way or another. Furthermore, the representative of the wild gods, Great Storm, was a wise being. The representative of the humans, Red Gale, was also the same, and Great Storm and Red Gale had always been opposing any fights against the North. In short, it meant that the Eastern forces attacking the jackdaws first was highly unlikely. But the jackdaws' situation is different. The Eastern forces had more troops, but this was natural for the jackdaws. In the numerous battles the two sides had fought in the past, the number of jackdaws had never been greater than the barbarians of the wild lands. And the jackdaws could see. The Eastern forces were now weak. So if they trample them here now, if they stab them in the back now, it would be possible to destroy the wild lands. It would be possible to eliminate their troubles, the longtime enemy of the North. It was such a big temptation. In addition, unlike the Eastern forces where the command was divided, only one person had the command of the jackdaws. Count H.R. Svelge. If he decided, the jackdaws would attack the Eastern forces, even if Count Chase opposed it. So we have to stay here. To reduce the possibility of a fight, even by a little. It's complicated. We just held hands and fought together, so it would be nice if we could all be friends, Tilda. Cordelia said as her shoulders slumped in her seeming depression, and Jude gave her some warm tea to comfort her. It's all right, even if it's impossible to become friends, they won't be enemies at least. That would be nice. Cordelia deeply sighed again and accepted the teacup from Jude, and he smiled again. In fact, Jude had one more evil purpose on why they stayed in the Eastern forces camp. Because we'll be in separate tents if we returned. They wouldn't let them share the same tent, even if the two were engaged. Of course, they weren't doing anything suspicious when they shared the same tent, but Jude still wanted to be with Cordelia if possible. I'm somehow desperate and troubled too. How did something like this happen to me? While Jude was worrying by himself, Cordelia widely opened her eyes. Wow, this is delicious. Because the tea tasted good. Her sad feelings seemed to have been relieved somehow. You should drink too, it's really delicious. It feels like my stamina will increase. Yes, I know that even though I'm not sure what you meant by increasing stamina. Jude responded with a smile and slowly drank his tea as he looked away. They should be done soon. The meeting between the jackdaws and the Eastern forces. The representatives of both sides were having a meeting in a kind of neutral zone located between the camps of the jackdaws and the Eastern forces, which were far from the tent of Jude and Cordelia. The representatives of the jackdaws were Count H.R., Svelga and Count Chase, while the Eastern forces representatives were Great Storm and Red Gale. I hope it ends well. He had a rough idea on what they were talking about. It would be the withdrawal of the jackdaws and a non-aggression pact with the Eastern forces. Neither side wanted to fight, so it should be amicably resolved. But Jude. Yes. When he turned his head to her sweet-sounding call, Cordelia, who had been sitting while covered in a blanket, raised her chin that was in between her knees and said, "Because the Wild Lands episode is over, we'll be heading to the royal capital now, right?" "I suppose so." The Len Kingdom, one of the two great powers of the continent, would be facing its destruction through 3 events. The first of these was the invasion of the northern barbarians, and the second was the Night of Massacre. An unprecedented situation in which the royal family of the Len Kingdom was virtually annihilated. With the north becoming a wasteland and the royal family disappearing, the Len Kingdom was on its path to destruction, even if they were a powerful kingdom. If we can stop the events that will happen until the Night of Massacre, it will really improve the situation. We'll be able to overcome all the 7 major calamities. By the time the 7 major calamities began in the game, the Len Kingdom was already on the verge of destruction, so it couldn't help in stopping the calamities. But if it survived and preserved its national power that was on par with the Empire, they would be a great help in preventing the 7 major calamities. I'm excited. In saving people. Yes, there's that too, but the royal capital is fun. Cordelia replied with quivering lips, as if she was a little embarrassed. And Jude nodded too. You're right, the royal capital episode was fun. Although the north was in chaos, it was not completely destroyed when the royal capital episode was still in progress. So until the royal capital episode ended, the Len Kingdom would remain standing. There were many big and small events in the royal capital where lots of people gathered, and among those events, there were a few that stimulated the girl's heart of Cordelia. The flow of events would clearly be different, because they would be going to fancy events like balls, and not just be fighting. Yes, the ball, the 300th anniversary of the country's founding. Jude very much looked forward to the ball that would be really grand. It would be a place where he could show off the beauty of Cordelia, not only to the Len Kingdom, but also to the foreign figures who would be gathered. Ahem, that would be nice. Cordelia frowned when Jude smiled like a fool. What is it? What are you thinking? You have a creepy smile. No, it's not. It's nothing. Would you like more tea? Yes, give me more. Here it is, madam. Jude poured tea into Cordelia's teacup and resumed talking again. Anyway, there will be a lot of encounters if we go to the royal capital. Several new playable characters will be making their appearance. That's right. Princess Daphne and Prince Dion. Cordelia's cheeks flushed as she gazed into the distance and imagined it. Do you like Daphne and Dion? Yes, because he's attractive. Dion is handsome. Dion is really handsome. He's cool. I like his personality. As Cordelia giggled and spoke, it was the opposite for Jude as his face hardened. Jude. No, right, attractive, handsome. Dion's, he kept that name in his mind, Dion. Jude's expression coldly sank, and Cordelia blinked her eyes and tilted her head, wondering if her senses had become dull at a time like this. And it was at that moment. "Can I come in?" At the question that came from outside the tent, Jude and Cordelia looked at each other and nodded. "Yes, you may come in." Jude gave his permission, and a boy entered from outside the tent. It was Great Storm. "What happened? Did the meeting go well?" Cordelia asked, and Great Storm nodded. Yes, it went well. The Northerners would withdraw tomorrow, and a non-aggression treaty had been signed wherein both sides would not attack each other for the next 5 years. "Wow, that's great, isn't that right, Jude?" "You're right, this much is the best." Cordelia was relieved when Jude agreed, and she then said to Great Storm, "Are you here to tell us?" "Yes, there is that too, but I think I have to tell you something too." Great Storm spoke and looked at Jude, who handed him a cup of tea that had already been prepared. "I told you about this during the day, that the demon followers would be blamed for blowing up the dragon veins, so you too should say that too. Rather, you reduce the aftermath of the great explosion. Got it?" "Yes. Yeah," Jude calmly answered with a slightly embarrassed face, while Cordelia timidly replied as she hunched her shoulders. Great Storm smiled at the reaction of the two, and then resumed his words after sipping his tea. "And this, I just want you to know, because you're the guardians of the wild lands." The surrounding area changed at that moment. They were still inside the tent of Jude and Cordelia, but the air itself changed. The sanctuary of Great Storm. His sacred place. The dragon vein has changed in the aftermath of the great explosion. Jude and Cordelia flinched. They knew that there would be an impact, but it seemed to be more than they had imagined. The Wild Lands was originally an uninhabitable land. It became possible to live there because of the wild gods who drew their powers from the dragon vein, so if they had caused a problem with the dragon vein itself, if the wild gods could no longer use their powers like how they used to. Don't be scared, there's nothing to worry, it actually got better. It got better. Yes, how should I say this, rather, it had become smooth flowing. You could say that the veins widened. Everything that obstructed the flow of the dragon veins were blown away by the great explosion, and the infrastructure of the High Elves were even incorporated into the dragon veins. It was natural that the circulation of the dragon vein became smoother as the blocked areas were opened and the veins had widened. Moreover, the Golden Dragon King woke up, and he is planning to recover his strength in the Snow Breeze Plain. In short, a new dragon vein stream, one on a colossal scale which had never existed before, would be created. As soon as he heard Great Storm's words, Jude understood why Great Storm wanted only the two of them to know about this conversation. Will a kingdom be built? Cordelia blinked her eyes at his question that skipped the process on how it got there, but not for Great Storm. The wild god nodded with a bitter smile. Probably. The West was greatly affected by the corruption and in ruins, and because the wild gods there were also annihilated, it became an uninhabitable land for the time being, even if there were dragon veins there. The East was also not completely free from the aftermath of the dragon veins explosion. All of the sanctuaries of the wild gods were destroyed, and it would be difficult to enjoy the same life as before until they had restored their sanctuaries. So a new one will be completely made. On the Snow Breeze Plain, several wild gods would join forces. A place where various tribes would live together, a huge city that would become the center of the wild lands. It would probably be a better place to live than before. Wow! Cordelia was in pure admiration, but not for Jude. The fact that the tribes in the wild lands that had been scattered until now would live in one place could only imply the possibility of a new kingdom being built. And it also hinted at another possibility. War. The fight between the North and the wild lands was really long and old. But the battles so far were not properly united, since they were nothing but a union of several tribes and were not really united as one, so their battles were just a fight between the many barbarians and the Northerners. But if a kingdom was established in the wild lands, if the barbarians became one, I'm not sure yet if a kingdom will really be established, or if it will eventually be divided again. Great Storm said as he read Jude's thoughts. And Jude realized the fact that he was Jude Bayer, the second son of the Bayer family. A threat to the north. A threat to the Len kingdom. It will be fine. Cordelia held Jude's hand. After figuring out the general flow of the conversation between the two, she smiled once again. It's Red Gale and Red Wind's country. It will take a long time to build, and there's no law that says you must fight because you founded something, right? We can be friends. Her thoughts were too soft. It was optimistic. But Jude unconsciously nodded. It wasn't just because he was in love with Cordelia. Because it could really become what Cordelia said. They didn't have to give up hope. She looks like an angel. No, wasn't she a real angel now? As Jude's mood softened, Great Storm opened his mouth again. We will heal our wounds here and become powerful again. So Jude and Cordelia, the guardians of the wild lands. Great Storm stopped talking at once and stood up. He respectfully bowed and said, as if treating them like the Golden Dragon King. Come to us whenever you need help. We will never forget the favors you had done for us. Even if you leave the wild lands, even if you are far away, even if the dizzyingly fast passage of time passes between us and you, we will not forget. We will remember your names. You too are our benefactors. Guardians of the wild lands, our sworn allies. Jude and Cordelia got up from their seats and respectfully bowed too. Cordelia nodded while feeling overwhelmed, and Jude spoke on behalf of them too. We heard it clearly. You won't regret it later, right? Just do it moderately. In any event, they would help the two. After he shook hands with Jude and had a 3-second hug with Cordelia, Great Storm left their tent, and Cordelia suddenly jumped in her spot. Oh, it feels nice. I'm really happy. She felt it on the battlefield too, but she thought that it was really fortunate that they came to the wild lands. And so did Jude. Aside from the benefits of getting help from the wild lands in the midst of the numerous events that would happen in the future, he was also thrilled. He felt it to be heartwarming. Okay, let's go to sleep now. Tomorrow onwards, we'll have to immediately return to the Len kingdom. Yes, let's sleep. Having already washed themselves, the two lied down straight away, and Jude damped down the fire. Jude felt that his heart was still overwhelmed, but he fell asleep as soon as he lied down, perhaps because a lot of things had happened today. But at that very moment, just when he was about to fall asleep. But Jude. Yes. I have a question. What is it? Jude turned to Cordelia, who had already turned to him. The only thing in between the two was the firewood fire that had almost gone out. What was the last thing that my dad gave to you today? It was the first time I had seen something like that. What is it? If it's good, let's eat it together, okay? No, I want to eat that together with you. Let's stop there. Jude turned around right away and suppressed his voice out of fear that it and his eyes would leak his thoughts. Go to bed, later, I'll tell you later. Tusk, you're mean. Cordelia grumbled, and Jude tried to calm the agitation of his heart. Fortunately, recalling Count Chase's face in a hurry was very helpful. Go to sleep. For tomorrow. Jude glanced back at Cordelia for the last time and smiled at the sight of Cordelia falling fast asleep. The next morning, after the crying and clinging Red Wind said her farewells and violent avalanche jumped up and down as he waved his hand, Jude and Cordelia left the wild lands. And at the same time, in a completely different place. Is that so? I understand. Princess Daphne curled her sparkling long blonde hair that seemed to have been made by melting gold, as she stared at the blazing fire and whispered. She slowly turned around and gazed at the sky. Jude Bayer and Cordelia Chase. Two people of destiny. She quietly whispered and faintly smiled, and a white bird flew towards the north. And at another place again. Beyond the Len kingdom, in the heart of the Argon Empire, the largest territory on the continent. A young man drew his sword. He looked at the distant south. Maximilian de Avies. The main character of Legend of Heroes 2. One of the 4 great swordsmen in Pleiades. He took a step forward. He began his trip to the Len kingdom. Late post again, sorry. And to those who are talking about the relationship of our crazy couple, let me just say that if the Wild Lands arc focused on Jude's side, his feelings, the Royal Capital arc will focus on Cordelia, so look forward to the next arc. I mean, this chapter in itself had already begun it. Terms used in this chapter. Wartime operational control, a commander's right to control military operations during wartime. The Northerners had a simple reason on why they were in a hurry to return as soon as the battle was over. Because the Jackdaws were reluctant to stay in the Wild Lands, which they considered as enemy territory. Of course, it's obvious why. They had been hostile with each other for many years. In fact, helping the Wild Lands that was beyond the border was a miracle in itself. To be exact, it would be more correct to say that rather than helping them, they were putting out the fire before it spread to their side. The tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom was a great event that shook the entire continent. It also happened only 10 years ago, so there was no Jackdaw who did not know about the tragedy of the Paragon Kingdom. This military operation became possible because of that. No one was sure on what would happen afterwards if they left the Hell Gate open in the Wild Lands. Count H.R. Svelga made a bold decision, and if it was my father, he would do so too. He probably did not submit a proper report to the Royal Capital, and used his wartime operational control to advance to the Wild Lands. If Count H.R. Svelga's decision was made half a day, no, just 1 hour late, it would have been difficult to remain unharmed. At least for Jude himself. He was confident that he could protect Cordelia's life somehow, but it was honestly questionable if he could take care of his own life under the circumstances they were in at that time. Thank you. Jude thanked the Count in his mind, before turning his gaze to the side. He saw Lena and Cordelia beside each other as they rode on horses not far away from him. The two angels were laughing as their horses moved forward. Lena's move was critical. She was one of the 5 heroes and was originally destined to die in the Wild Lands. But she didn't die, so she was now heading to the Len Kingdom to meet the other heroes, Landius and Camille. How would her survival affect the fate of Pleiades? Would it help the survival of Landius? Jude actually found Landius' death to be the biggest mystery now. Why in the world and how did he meet his death? I don't know the cause, so I have no idea on how to stop it. The Landius he first saw in the game, and the Landius he met now. Jude's perception of him had changed, because his understanding of Landius' power itself changed. I understand now that I've grown stronger. There was a difference between the situation of simply knowing the power of a game character through numerical values, and the situation where he actually developed and used that power. Landius' strength was on a truly colossal level. Jude couldn't even imagine how strong Landius was now, given that he had opened up to the 7th door of the 9th Heaven's 9 doors, which was the current Landius limit. There's something. Landius had said that he himself would come find Jude in due time. There was a high possibility that he would contact Jude in any way once he hears from Lena that Jude himself had opened the 4th door. Perhaps that action alone would help him avoid death. After he tried to think positively, Jude looked at Lena and Cordelia again. He saw the beautiful sight of Cordelia looking up at Lena and chattering like a baby bird. Ahem. At the moment, he tried to enter into listening mode. Mr. Jude. Lord Lucas. Jude turned to Lucas, whose horse approached him, and then smiled. Because Jude had a conscience too. Jude felt that he had a lot of things to apologize for to Lucas. I apologize, I had left just like that. No, you had your circumstances. I didn't expect the two of you to be working undercover for the Guardians of the Holy Cross. Rather, we HR, Svelga almost spoiled your plans. The information Lucas heard seemed to have been distorted, so his misunderstanding deepened. He seemed to think that their mission from the Guardians of the Holy Cross was what originally made the two leave the HR, Svelga territory and head for Frost Anvil. What should I do about this? Jude had used the Guardians of the Holy Cross and the Fairy Queen as an excuse for some time, but things were a little different this time. It was better to not use false information if it could be verified, or if it would become a problem when the truth was revealed later. Lucas and I will be meeting each other more in the future. Red Wind had promised to come to the Len Kingdom and help Jude and Cordelia once she had improved her skills in the wild lands. Lucas also had to properly train so that they could fully use his power for the playable character alliance that they would form in the future. Well, I'll think about that later. Not for now, but when the situation had calmed down a bit. They hadn't returned to Thunderdoom Fortress yet. Say, Mr. Jude. Yes, Lord Lucas. Lucas' face suddenly flushed when Jude softly answered. Jude instantly flinched at his shy reaction, but maintained his composure. Lucas then said while fidgeting, "That I wish to ask you a favor." "Yes, go ahead. May I spar with you?" His face was still red, but his gaze was serious. Now that Jude thought about it, the reason why Lucas approached him in the first place and asked to be his friend was because Lucas said something like, "I need a good rival." So that's why his face turned red. He said that he needed a good rival, and that he had no opponents around his age, but Jude and Cordelia had run away then because they had other priorities. Ahem. Jude faintly smiled as he faced Lucas, who was looking at him. As he saw Lucas' sparkling eyes, he realized again that the other was a 16-year-old boy. "I can do it if it's sparring." The question was to what extent he would be fighting against Lucas. Because it was not an exaggeration to say that the current gap between Jude and Lucas was like heaven and earth. Lucas was much stronger than Jude just 2 months ago, but that 2 months was a problem. Jude had gone through a seriously drastic change. Even Cordelia will have the upper hand when it came to their physical abilities. Lucas would have practiced and worked hard too, but his limits were clear. He should only be around level 20 now. On the other hand, Cordelia had a level of 71. Level was a thug, and even if their professions of swordsman and wizard were widely different, Cordelia was still much stronger than him. Not by her total combat power, but by her physical abilities alone. But Jude's physical abilities were far greater than Cordelia's. Wouldn't he be depressed if I really fight against him? Even Red Wind, who chased after Cordelia and called her unnigh, had a time when she cried in frustration at the difference of their skills. Lucas, who was proud of his talents, might end up falling into despair. Let's do it moderately. Moderately to a level where Lucas can foster a sense of rivalry with him. Mr. Jude. The fidgeting Lucas played with his fingers as he looked at Jude with an anxious face. Lucas opened his mouth again when Jude was worrying by himself, but Jude then nodded his head. "Okay, let's have a fight when we arrive at Thunderdoom Fortress. I feel excited when I think that I'll be fighting Lord Lucas." "So do I, since a long time ago." When Lucas excitedly replied, but suddenly trailed off his words, Jude smiled again. He told Lucas whose actions he found to be rather cute. "The best way to improve your skills is to compete with your rival." Haha, you're right. It was a line from Built-Tween the Hero. Lucas was actually aware that Jude was stronger than himself one way or another, so he was embarrassed when he said that Jude was his rival, but he was really happy when Jude considered him a rival too. His face turned redder. Cute. Jude tried to suppress his laughter, and Lucas cleared his throat before he turned to Cordelia and said, "Lady Cordelia has become more beautiful." Yes, she is a real angel now. She succeeded in ancestral regression and became an angel. She had only done that in the game around the time of the 7 major calamities, so it was a huge progress. Jude spoke with a happy face, and Lucas blinked his eyes and soon had an awkward expression. "Lord Lucas." Yes, that's right, she is Mr. Jude's angel, Lady Cordelia. Lucas awkwardly laughed, and Jude just laughed along and didn't correct him. "I'll see you later then." "Yes, I'll see you later." After they silently exchanged greetings, Lucas prodded his horse to head towards Count Hr. Svelga, and Jude looked back at their schedule. "First, we'll go to Thunderdoom Fortress. After that, we'll head to Langisthay via Vedafolnia, and it's important that we get the Fall protection in the valley." They needed to secretly meet the Fall fairies in a valley that was in the middle of 2 mountains. It wasn't difficult for them to get it as Cordelia, only needed to call them by singing Little Star while taking a bath. However, getting to that place on purpose was a bit of a challenge. Well, it will work out somehow. They could just run away for a while again. Jude thought that Adelia would immediately become angry if she heard about this. He then looked in front of him again, because Cordelia was approaching him. Jude. Yes. You see. As she drew closer to Jude, Cordelia looked around her and then said in a very small voice, Unnai and brother-in-law, they're acting strange. Something was unusual. Jude turned to Adelia and Gar-El before having a lukewarm expression. Because the two were near each other and were having a pleasant chat as they looked at each other, creating a pink atmosphere around them. See, aren't they strange? It was the moment Cordelia spoke. Gar-El and Adelia took a quick look at their surroundings, brought their faces closer, and shared a very brief kiss. Just a second. The two distanced themselves after their quick kiss, and Gar-El awkwardly smiled while Adelia blushed and was at a loss on what to do. And the jackdaws who happened to witness the scene all had the same awful expressions, while Cordelia widely opened her eyes. Jude. They just kissed. Jude strongly gazed at them again and frowned. There seemed to be a notable incident that caused the relationship of the two to rapidly progress in the few days they left the Wild Lands and headed to Thunderdoom Fortress. Wow, what is this? What happened? What happened between you two in just a few days? At the time when the overly excited Cordelia sent a glance to Jude. Cordelia. Do you know something? Do you know anything about it? No, but your sister is coming. Cordelia almost fell off her horse at the time when Jude spoke, and managed to balance herself before quickly turning her head. As Jude had said, Adelia was coming their way. Cordelia. You and I. The two sisters had red faces, though the reasons behind it were different. Adelia glanced at Jude and spoke to Cordelia again. I have something to tell you, come with me. Yes, I'll go with you. Cordelia took a peek at Jude before she moved towards Adelia, and the horses of the two sisters began to move forward beside each other. What is she going to say? No, I want to ask her more than that. On what had happened. Cordelia waited as she tried to control her pounding heart, and Adelia spoke after taking a deep breath. Cordelia. Yes. When we return, we'll have an engagement ceremony. Engagement ceremony. With who? At Cordelia's gaze that clearly asked what she meant, Adelia suddenly cleared her throat and said a little shamelessly. Me's Lord Gar-El and me. They would have an engagement ceremony. Because our wedding was too early. There were things that had to be settled for both sides. Cordelia's eyes widened at Adelia's bombshell declaration, and her mouth opened and closed like a carp. Well. Why, what is it, why? No, anyway, this is not right, okay? How many days have you two seen each other? This is not a Disney cartoon, where one falls in love as soon as they meet, and agree to get married within a day. Adelia snorted and replied at Cordelia's strong argument. I've seen him for over a month. Not just a few days, it was more than a month, so several dozens of days. But Cordelia still looked unconvinced, and Adelia said as her lips quivered. All nobles get married anyway. It's rare for something like low love to develop between the two, so I have to somehow grab an opportunity like this, and it's not a shotgun marriage. We had never met much before this. Adelia stuttered several times at first, but her words went smoothly at the end because of her enthusiasm. When Cordelia couldn't immediately answer at her sudden counterattack, Adelia dealt an extra blow. But now that we love each other, we cannot live without each other, you understand, right? No, that. Jude and I are not really head over heels each other. Adelia thought that Cordelia was embarrassed when she hesitated, so she said with a giggle. Anyway, just know that, do you understand? Yes. Why are you looking like that? You don't like it? No, it's really great. Congratulations, Unnai. Yes, you too. I wish you happiness, the two of you. Anyway, the two were a really well-matched pair. After Adelia smiled and stroked Cordelia's hair, She went back to Gar-L's side and Jude headed to where Adelia had been. Did she say that they were engaged? How did you know? There are times when I wonder if your senses are good or not. Did your senses specialize in combat only, just like that of beasts? Do you wanna die? Cordelia reflexively cursed and pouted several times before she turned to Adelia. Adelia looked so pretty and lovely while she was chatting with Gar-L. Is this for real? She couldn't believe her sister was getting engaged. And with brother-in-law Gar-L too. Engagement. A phase before marriage. A phase where a couple would declare to the world that they would be getting married. Wow, really, we really changed the original by a lot. Unnai is getting married, she's getting married. Cordelia was in a daze as she let out oohs and ahs several times, but she suddenly realized one fact. Engagement. Marriage. Wait. That one fact. In fact, her thoughts were all over the place because she was only thinking of changing the future depicted in the game, so she forgot that one fact. The future had changed. Cordelia wasn't kidnapped by the devil's hand in Langesthay, and she obviously didn't went missing. Jude did not go to the north to search for his fiancée, and the northern barbarians' invasion did not come true. Count Bear was alive, and Count Chase was alive too. And the results of that change. Jude and Cordelia's engagement were naturally dissolved in the original. But not now. Rather, it even became as firm as rock. Cordelia quickly looked at Jude and stared at the handsome Jude's profile. When Jude felt her gaze and turned to her side, she swiftly turned her head again and avoided his gaze. That one fact. It was ridiculous that she only remembered it now, but it was still something very important. At this rate, won't I end up marrying Jude? With Jude. Without boxers 009. Cordelia blinked her eyes, her mind went blank and she couldn't think of anything else. Sorry for the late release again. I've been quite busy this past few days. The next chapter will also be long, so expect it to be released on Saturday. Hopefully, I'll be less busy by next week. Terms used in this chapter. Axe disease, Korean slang in which a person believes that everybody has a crush on him/her. Marriage. She had never seriously thought about that when she was reincarnated as Cordelia, or even in her time as Hong Yoo-Hee in her previous life. Because both were too young to consider marriage seriously. I've never had a proper relationship after all. I went to an all-girls high school after an all-girls middle school. Of course, some of my classmates had gone on dates and such. Anyway. Marriage. Holding hands, hugging, kai, yes, even kissing. That. Cordelia's face turned red, because she remembered what Adelia had talked about just then. Something she had never thought about seriously. As if it was a faraway fantasy. But it's become a reality now. And that Jude is my partner. Let's imagine. Cordelia closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It wasn't something she should do while on the back of a horse, but she did it anyway. Good, my mind is clear. Cordelia first thought of Adelia and Gar-L. The sight that she had just seen. Two people who shared a quick kiss while the jackdaws were watching them. Okay, I remembered it, so. If she changed Gar-L to Jude and Adelia to herself. Cordelia silently screamed. Her head went blank again, and she almost fell off her horse. But was Cordelia after all? She took pride in her ability to move her body as she pleased, which was not inferior to Jude's talent brought about by his Chinmujic, so she was able to quickly balance herself and not fall off her horse. But she couldn't stop the confusion, fear, and other things from her wildly excited mind. No way. But contrary to her own will, her imagination continued. The one Adelia had said just before. The flirting the two had done. She replaced it with Jude and herself, and Cordelia silently screamed once again. What do I do? Her original fair-looking face was now completely burning red. As if it would explode if she just touched it. No way, that's right, that's ridiculous. It's a delusion. An extreme delusion. Because the partner is Jude. Outboxer 009. That evil B** starred who always made fun of me. That wicked B** starred who made fun of me for being bad at games from the very first time we met. Who's who? Cordelia took slow and deep breaths and somehow calmed her pounding heart. That's right, no way, yes, it doesn't make any sense. Jude and me getting married. HMPH, that's ridiculous tilde yes, so I don't have to worry about this tilde. F***CK. Having an optimistic mindset was not easy. But Cordelia thought again after calming down her heart with one curse word. Anyway, marriage is between two people, right? There was also the situation of the union of two families. So it was something two parties were involved in. So it's okay. They were Jude and Cordelia. And in the future, Pleiades was going to be in a huge mess. When the 7 major calamities began, the whole world and not just the Len kingdom would be involved, so the future events would be so bad that it couldn't get any worse than that. Thus, there was a possibility that the engagement would somehow be dissolved. Of course, our goal is to prevent the future events from getting any worse. Anyway, marriage was still a long way off. It was not something she should be worried about now. That's right, I'm young. She was still a minor. Of course, she was legally considered a minor, but marriages between underaged men and women were very common in Pleiades. Good, come to think of it, it's not something I should worry about alone. If it's Jude, he'll definitely find a way to do something. If it's my Jude. Ah, how reassuring. One way or another, she seriously felt reassured that he was on her side. After regaining her peace of mind, Cordelia raised her head and gazed at Jude's profile again. She unintentionally thought, no, she fell into thinking. Wait, didn't we hold hands a lot of times? It was often enough that I stopped remembering the fact that he held my hand. Come to think of it, we did that today too. I think he held my hand more than 10 times today. As for the hugging, when they wandered in the wild lands, they had hugged each other and slept together almost every day. Princess Carrie, piggyback, Princess Carrie again. A very natural routine. Wow, what is this? She was very embarrassed. Her face turned red again. And no, it's okay. I didn't do it consciously, it was because of the environment. Comrade, friend, yes, something like that. Cordelia forcefully rationalized her past actions and took a deep breath before looking at Jude, but she ended up turning her head again. Damn, what's wrong with me? Why do I only see his lips? It's Adelia Unnai. Adelia Unnai filled my head with poison. Why were you kissing in public where everyone could see you? Cordelia blamed Adelia for a moment, which allowed her to regain her peace of mind. Who good, anyway, if I think about it logically, there's no law that says that I have to marry Jude. Yes, that's right. Because the future was something no one knew. But what about Jude? Did he question it? It's a bit annoying, but there's no way that Jude didn't think of what I had thought. Did Jude thought about getting married to me? What did he think of when he thought about it? Wait a minute. At that moment, Cordelia's eyes narrowed. And Cordelia recounted one by one on what had happened with Jude in the wild lands. Jude became very kind at some point. Jude was always kind to her. Jude would ask her if it was hard before giving her a piggyback. He always served me delicious food. HMMM. Cordelia's eyes became narrower. And after a long time, she activated her woman's intuition and not her beastly intuition. Maybe he likes me. Jude likes Cordelia. That doesn't make sense. That's nonsense. Yes, it's ridiculous. It's nonsense, but just because he was nice to her didn't mean he liked her. Maybe he's nice to me because he likes me. That's such a silly idea. Should I just ask him? Do you like me? Can I say that? No, F***CK, this is no good. Cordelia took a deep breath again, as a curse naturally came out after a long time. No matter how much she thought about it, asking him directly was too risky. That's right, and what if I was wrong? If I ask, do you like me, and he answers, no, I don't. He'll seriously treat me as a patient with Axe disease. No way, I can't stand that, I can't do it. I'm sure he'll make fun of me for it over and over. So she couldn't directly ask him, she needed to find another way. Okay, then let's observe and find out. I have plenty of time to observe because we're always together. Yes, that's right, I'll figure it out. Cordelia's thoughts seemed to have seriously digressed, but in the first place, her continuing delusions and worries was what led her to do that in order to get rid of her panic. Since she had come to a conclusion, Cordelia began to work out on a plan for a while. And in the place right next to her, Jude was unaware of Cordelia's dynamic change, and her face repeatedly turning red to the point that one would be worried about her blood pressure. Because he was closely looking at something other than Cordelia's face. What a shame. Her cat ears and tail that swayed every time she moved. It really suits her. It's so cute. But she can't go around the Len Kingdom wearing that. It's too bad. But I'll still keep it. Jude didn't tell Cordelia about it, but he had kept the rabbit headband and tail too. All right, I'll figure it out. I'll ask her to wear it if an opportunity comes in the future. Cordelia and Jude were having different thoughts, and Gar, Elle and Adelia watched the two from a distance before they looked at each other and sweetly smiled. They really get along, right? Of course, you're really beautiful, Adelia. Just like always, the two were still bad at having a conversation with their eyes. And the jackdaws all frowned when they not only saw the actions of Gar, Elle and Adelia, but also that of Jude and Cordelia. What a nasty world. What the hell were we fighting for in the north? The march continued while everyone was lost in their thoughts, and time smoothly passed by. 2 days later, Jude and Cordelia finally saw the fortress city that the north boasted of as the strongest, Thunderdome. Glory be to the victorious jackdaws. Hurrah! The jackdaws weren't the only ones who lived in Thunderdome Fortress. As a fortress city, the ordinary citizens weren't a few as tens of thousands of them were enthusiastic of the victorious return of the jackdaws. Long live Count H.R. Svelga. Woo-oh! Long live the jackdaws. Yezera! The whole fortress city was filled with a festive atmosphere. It was natural to show such an enthusiastic reaction, since the jackdaws who always guarded the border had directly crossed it, and went on an expedition to the barbaric lands for the first time and even claimed victory. They only had a few festivals to begin with. This was a fortress city that was wary of the barbarians, since no one knew when they would be attacked. So there was no way they would miss this opportunity to have a festival in this place where entertainment was lacking. Our count was amazing. You should have seen it, the valiant charge of the lances of our jackdaws. Those guys were just a bunch of weak demon followers. The jackdaws talked about their exploits everywhere, and the jackdaws who were unable to participate in the expedition because they had to protect the fortress were struggling in regret. There was alcohol, music, and delicious food. The night deepened. Cordelia wore a white and flowing dress after a long time, and she looked around to her left and right. They're gone. Gar, Elle, and Adelia. They suddenly disappeared like ghosts at some point. Yuzu. What are they doing that they had to leave? Cordelia tried to calm herself as her face turned red, before she threw a sharp gaze at her target. Jude Bayer, Cordelia's own fiancé, who was sharing a glass of juice with Lucas instead of a glass of alcohol. Let's sound him out. Not to the point of seduction, but anyway, let's find out if he likes me or not. Cordelia steeled her mind and headed to Jude with a pounding heart. But when she got closer, the atmosphere between Jude and Lucas was strange. May I ask you for the favor? Do you mean now? Yes, I know it's a rude request, but I can't wait any longer. All I can think of is Mr. Jude. What? The last one was Cordelia, and fortunately, she only shouted in her mind. What Lucas only thinks of Jude. Why is that? And no way. Around the time when Cordelia's delusional thoughts were about to run wild, Jude stood up and called Cordelia. Cordelia. Yes. Cordelia quickly replied and ran to Jude, who then said with a slightly awkward smile, Lord Lucas has asked me to spar with him, so we're thinking of going to the training area now. Sparring, so it was like that, huh? What a relief. Jude was puzzled when Cordelia sighed in relief, but he soon went back to the main topic. Moving on, since we're going to the training area, would you like to go with us there? Cordelia immediately nodded at Jude's suggestion. Yes, I'll go. Can I come with you, Lord Lucas? No problem. Lucas responded with a slightly stiff face. Not because he was dissatisfied with Cordelia coming along, but because he was nervous about the fact that he was going to spar with Jude. Let's go then, Jude said with a smile as he naturally took Cordelia's hand and began to escort her. Cordelia would have normally walked without thinking, but her eyes narrowed for a moment. And Lucas followed behind the two. I think I'll go easy on him. You mean you'll easily defeat him? Easily defeat, is Lucas a mob? Lucas, go easy on him, do it gently. The two had a conversation with their eyes for some time. The three then arrived at the training area, located in the basement of Thunderdoom Fortress. There was also an outdoor training area, but he didn't want their match to be seen by others. This would be better for Lucas. He said he would go easy, but Lucas was still a sword genius. Lucas would notice it if he didn't seriously fight. So he must go easy, but not hide his strength at the same time. And if that happened, Lucas will be crushed. It would be quite a mess. So he couldn't let others see it. They had to spar in a quiet place. I hope it will be a chance for him to break from his shell. That was what they did to Red Wind. She cried and was frustrated by their difference in power, but she soon got up and trained harder. The magic sphere lighted up the darkness. Lucas stood on the stone floor of the training area and took a deep breath. I'm going. Good luck fighting. Cordelia spontaneously cheered with her eyes before she went to a corner, and Jude headed to Lucas. But it was the moment when the two faced each other. They sensed the presence of someone. They hadn't felt it until now, but they suddenly felt a strong presence at that moment. Jude and Lucas reflexively turned and saw Count H.R. Svelga standing on one side of the training area. One of the 10 swordmasters of the Len Kingdom. Lucas' father and a user of the Sage King's cross sword. Do not mind me, just start. He spoke in a low voice and stood next to Cordelia, who unconsciously flinched and looked at Jude. And Jude had a bitter smile. This was Thunderdoom Fortress. Since it was the nest of the jackdaws, it was impossible to do something without Count H.R. Svelga knowing about it. Count H.R. Svelga, one of the Northern Sagang, a swordsman at his peak who was said to be evenly matched with Count Bayer. Does he want to compare Lucas and me, or perhaps he wants to gauge the power of Count Bayer through me? Maybe it's just pure curiosity. Jude got rid of the complicated thoughts that filled his mind. Lucas and Count H.R. Svelga were both their allies. Especially Lucas, who was like a pure child. So it would be better to think of it as pure curiosity. Shall we begin? Lucas was startled at Jude's question. He was already nervous, so when Count H.R. Svelga appeared, he seemed to have completely frozen. But he was still Lucas. As one of the best playable characters with a talent for the sword, his mood changed when he held his sword. He shook off his tension with one breath. Let's begin, Lucas said, and Jude clenched his fists after worrying a bit. He wrapped his arms with the energy of the Black Dragon and then faced Lucas. A spar with Lucas. And perhaps the next person would be Count H.R. Svelga. Jude cut off his thoughts. With a cry, he raised his fist and rushed towards Lucas. The chapter is finally here, and I'm finally free now, so chapters will be released in its usual release schedule starting on Monday. Terms used in this chapter: Dynamic vision, the ability of the eye to visually discern the fine details of a moving object. Equal breathing, a breathing technique where inhalation and exhalation have the same equal duration. It is a yoga technique that helps in lowering stress and calming the mind and body. Beyond the skis, an expression that means something is so high or great that it is higher than the sky. Sword and fist. Jude could fight using both, but the truth was, he was not properly trained in either. Because I was born with Gyumjulmeek. Jude Bayer never properly learned any martial arts until he was 17. Training with a body that couldn't even exercise every day was like a death wish. But after he got the sun's necklace, the symptoms of his Gyumjulmeek weakened and he became able to fight quite well. He also passed the Bayer family's test and didn't have much difficulty in using techniques and skills when he fought against monsters. And the reason was simple. I learned some techniques in my previous life. Kang Jin-ho lived in the modern times, so what was called swordsmanship, there was the knife fighting he learned a little, but it was a different situation for fist technique, or more precisely, barehanded combat. Because Kang Jin-ho had the experience of learning various martial arts that were utilized in kickboxing. Of course, that doesn't mean I'll be fighting that way. The martial arts that one could learn in Pleiades enabled humans to move in superhuman ways, and it was also possible to materialize a destructive force that could not be created with ordinary martial arts. The opponents were also monsters or demonic humans, and not the same human beings, so he had no choice but to fight in a different way from modern martial arts. But even if that is so, Kang Jin-ho was a man who was good at barehanded combat, so Jude naturally continued to fight with his bare fists rather than using a sword. He used a sword from time to time, but he mainly used his fists. So I'll be using my fists. It was possible for him to fight with a sword too. Jude and Lucas had an enormous difference in physical abilities, so it was possible for him to win with just a sword. But he didn't want to do that. He can tell. Lucas was a genius of the sword. He had been training with swords for a long time, so he developed eyes that could tell his opponent's strength. Lucas knows it too. The fact that he was no match for Jude. But nevertheless, he challenged Jude. Even though he knew that he would lose, even if he knew that he would get beaten. So I'll do it seriously. I'll sincerely respond to your sincerity. He obviously didn't mean that he would use his full strength to defeat Lucas, but he at least wouldn't fight Lucas carelessly. Huh? Lucas' yell cut off his thoughts. No, Jude's focus was already on Lucas in the first place. Lucas' movement. The trajectory drawn by his sword. Jude naturally calculated it. He read Lucas' next move and intention, based on the information he obtained by using not only the visual information, but also his 5 senses. And he responded to it. His body had become so powerful that it couldn't even compare to the days when he was Kang Jin-ho. His muscular strength, agility, endurance, and so on were already on the level of a superhuman, and his reflexes and dynamic vision were also incomparable. Add to that was his Chunmujic. His heavenly talent for martial arts made it possible for him to analyze his opponent by just looking at his opponent's sword. Lucas swung his sword. Jude avoided the sword with minimal movement. By doing so, he penetrated into that gap and threw a punch. Clark Lang. Lucas' sword blocked Jude's fist. To be exact, he hastily pulled his sword halfway to forcefully block Jude's fist, which was close to hitting him. Either way, he managed to defend himself. Lucas took a step back and Jude chased him. Clang, clang, clang. Sharp sounds burst as the sword and fist collided. Lucas with his sword had a far better advantage in terms of reach, but its complete advantage didn't work on Jude. Jude's arms that were covered with the Black Dragon's energy continuously blocked Lucas' sword, and Lucas got cold sweats from Jude's kick attack, which he rarely experienced fighting against. He's barely holding his ground. Cordelia thought as her eyes narrowed. If Jude increased his speed a bit more, Lucas would lose a bit of his concentration and it would end at once. Jude knew it and Lucas knew it. And Count Hr Svelga knew it too. Unbelievable. Count Hr Svelga was a warrior too. He was a competitive man, so he was quite interested in Count Bayer, who was considered as one of his best rivals by people everywhere. Therefore, he was familiar with Jude. Not so long ago, Jude was a child who couldn't even go outside as he pleased because of his Gumjalmeek. But the current Jude was beating Lucas, who the famed sword genius himself, Count Hr Svelga, admitted as having more talent than himself in his youth. It was like a fight between an adult and a child. Perhaps the difference was even more than that. How odd. Is it possible to have such an explosive growth in just a few months? Did Count Bayer deceive everyone by saying that his son had an illness? No, that's not important. The important thing was the fact that Jude's skills were real and different from what was known in the past. I want to see it. Jude's real skills. The greatest power he could exhibit. Clang! Lucas' stance collapsed along with the loud sound. The sword that could not withstand the onslaught of Jude rolled on the floor, and Jude's fist stopped right in front of Lucas' chest. Lucas exhaled a rough breath. But he looked at Jude and held his breath. He declared it after he clenched his teeth for some time as he suppressed his emotions. I lost. It was a good match. When Jude withdrew his fist, Lucas sank on the floor. At the moment he declared his defeat, the tension on his legs, no, his whole body loosened. I lost. He knew that he was going to lose, but he had lost for real now. And he confirmed it. The absolute gap between them. At least 1 or 2 months. The time when Lucas himself did not see Jude. In that time, Jude achieved a seriously tremendous growth. Is this what frustration is? Is this what despair is like? He was born as a genius, so he had never felt something like this before. He was shattered by the overwhelming gap that he couldn't even feel like he would ever catch up to Jude. Lucas, get up. Lucas' body involuntarily stiffened upon hearing the voice behind him. He forced himself to stand up. Good job, you've improved. Lucas was stunned at the words of Count Hr Svelga. But Count Hr Svelga was telling the truth. Lucas had naturally become more skilled than what he had previously seen. I'll talk more about it later, take a break for now. Yes, father. Lucas obediently responded this time before he headed to the side. Only then did he saw the restless Cordelia standing alone that he realized that Jude and Count Hr Svelga were left in the training area and facing each other. Father. Lucas turned around and upon seeing Count Hr Svelga's eyes, he realized it. His father had a serious look. Can we have a match if it's all right with you? Count Hr Svelga said, and Jude bitterly smiled. He had expected this to happen, and now that it became real, he couldn't help but feel pressured. Still, this is also an opportunity. Count Hr Svelga was a considerably strong man, even in the entire Pleiades. After all, he was one of the best in the Len Kingdom, and one of the continent's strongest. The so-called swordmaster. A swordsman, a great swordmaster. How many times would I have a chance to fight against the sword of a swordsman at his level? Of course, there will be many opportunities when I arrive home. After calming himself a bit with his idle thoughts, Jude did some equal breathing before he nodded his head. He turned to Cordelia at that moment. I'll do it. Are you sure? Their conversation with their eyes was almost like telepathy. Jude clenched his fist, and Cordelia repeatedly stamped her feet before deeply sighing. She likewise clenched her fists and looked at Jude. Hit him once if you're going to do it, okay? If it's possible. No, it's not if it's possible. You must seriously do it. Okay. Cordelia widely smiled after being satisfied with Jude's answer, and Jude was pleased too. He faced Count Hr Svelga again and said, It would be an honor. Let's begin then. Count Hr Svelga held up a wooden sword, and Jude took a long breath before getting into position. It's quite the opposite now. The opposite of his spar with Lucas. No, perhaps it was more than that. Jude ended his smile and erased his useless thoughts. He focused on Count Hr. Svelga and then charged at some point. Bang! A sudden noise, and countless sounds resounded one after another. Jude poured a barrage of fierce attacks, and Count Hr. Svelga stopped all his attacks. He ignored, blocked, or sometimes avoided it. He used his battle aura. Count Hr. Svelga used his battle aura for Jude, so that Jude could seriously give it his all. Boodawam! The energy of the 4 black dragons jumped from Jude's hands. The surface of Count Hr. Svelga's sword was filled with a faint glow, and a pure white aura soon appeared on his blade. Lucas even forgot to breathe as he watched the fight of the two. Count Hr. Svelga stopped defending from Jude's attacks. As soon as Jude's energy reached its peak, Count Hr. Svelga began his attack at that moment. A straight downward cut. It was a simple attack, but was hard to block or avoid. Jude saw the downward cut rushing before him. He couldn't even think on what he should do, so he just moved frantically. He evaded the sword attack by gaining distance as far as possible. He couldn't do anything else except to step backwards. But it was just the beginning. Count Hr. Svelga took a step forward. Jude had tried his best to evade, but he didn't manage to get far away yet, so Count Hr. Svelga's one step immediately closed the distance between them. And his sword struck again. It was an ordinary horizontal slash this time. No, it was by no means ordinary. Jude realized it at some point. Sage King's cross sword. Count Hr. Svelga was now using the Sage King's cross sword. An invisible flow of Kai energy was incorporated into the Sage King's cross sword with his every move. As expected of a great swordmaster, it continued. Each of his small movements embodied the Sage King's cross sword. A smile spread over Jude's face. He had no choice but to do that. Several more sword attacks assailed Jude. Each time he evaded, blocked, and ignored the attacks, Jude's movement increasingly became more unstable. Cordelia was feeling amazed and distressed at the same time. She was happy that she witnessed Count Hr. Svelga's swordsmanship that was close to a superhuman skill, but it was very distressful for her to see Jude being driven into a corner. Moreover, Cordelia could see it. The next attack would be the last. Jude would be completely defeated by the Sage King's cross sword with the next attack. I hate it. She knew it was unreasonable, but she still hated it. She did not want to see it. Because he was Jude. Because he was Outboxer 009. Because he was the guy who always wanted to be number one. Cordelia grit her teeth. With clenched fists, she wished and wished again. She stubbornly wished and prayed for Jude. And at some point, when Count Hr. Svelga finally raised his sword for the last attack, "Hey," Cordelia unknowingly uttered. Because she saw it. Because her talent for skipping the process and grasping the results had informed her. Something unusual. Something that broke the natural flow. The corners of Cordelia's mouth were raised. She saw the eyes of Jude and brightly smiled again. She calmed her pounding heart and cried out in her mind. Jude! Bang! Jude stepped on the ground. He observed Count Hr. Svelga's sword. It was still incomparable. An insurmountable wall. But something changed. No, Jude himself made it happen. Sage King's cross sword. He caught a glimpse of it from Lucas. He felt it through Count Hr. Svelga. And he could tell. It was the same as the martial arts of the Guardians of the Holy Cross. That it was a martial art that once walked along the same path as the other. But that was not the important thing. Jude could feel it. He sensed the Sage King's cross sword itself. Chanmujit, the incarnation of martial arts from the heavens. Something added to that. 9 heavens and 9 worlds. The power of the 9th heaven's 9 doors that could flow into all things, as it encompassed the entire heavens and earth. He was not conscious of it. His body had naturally moved at some point. He wondered if this was the world Cordelia usually saw. No, he was wrong. Because Jude was still making calculations at that moment. Count H.R. Svelga's sword was perfect, so he tweaked it. He twisted the path of the sword. All he needed then was power. The strong energy that rose was something that Jude himself had yet to use, and it caused Count H.R. Svelga to be confused. Bang! Cordelia witnessed it. Jude kicked the ground strongly. He shifted his center of gravity at once, clenched his fist, and reproduced what he saw and felt into a mnemonic chant of Ninth Heaven's 9 doors. Sage King's Cross Sword. Sage King's Cross Strike. The dragon's energy gathered in Jude's fist. Count H.R. Svelga was flustered at that moment, because he understood at the very moment he saw it. And Jude's attack burst. It crushed Count H.R. Svelga's attack. SHY. The cross of the Sage King, which was the symbol of the Sage King's cross sword, was drawn in the air. Count H.R. Svelga was pushed back, and his attack became useless. But it was just a moment. Count H.R. Svelga swung his sword again. It broke and destroyed Jude's cross at once, and by the time Jude raised his head, his sword had already touched Jude's neck. The conclusion. The match was decided. Jude was defeated. But Cordelia jumped from her spot and liked it, while Lucas couldn't close his open mouth. Count H.R. Svelga also let out a short and rough breath. I lost, Jude said, and Count H.R. Svelga withdrew his sword. And he swallowed the words that seemed to come out of his mouth. How? He already knew the answer. Jude didn't steal the secret of the Sage King's cross sword, nor did Count Bayer study the Sage King's cross sword for a long time. Chenmu Jet. The incarnation of martial arts from the heavens. No, it wasn't just that. There was more to Jude than that. He's a monster. Laughter flowed out unknowingly. They said that laughter comes out when one faces an absurd situation, and that seemed to be true. No, it's not just that. His heart was pounding. He was excited to see on how much this guy in front of him would grow, and how he would compete with himself in the future. It was fun. You can go back now and rest. If you need it, I'll send someone to assist you. It's all right. Instead, I'll take a rest at the training area before heading back. Let's do that then. Count H.R. Svelga returned the wooden sword instead of saying anything more and headed to Lucas, who was still blankly staring. He lightly patted his shoulder to bring Lucas to his senses before they went out of the training area together. Hi. Jude exhaled and fell to the floor. Tala. He lied down on his back and stretched out his whole body. Is this the power of one of the 10 swordmasters? Neither Landius nor Camille had ever shown a real sword in front of Jude. The same was true for Count Bayer. But Count H.R. Svelga showed him the real sword just now. It's really like the sky. There was a reason why they used the phrase, beyond the skis. But he continued to smile for some reason. I'll be able to reach it someday. I'll rise to a higher level. It's been a long time. In the past, Kang Jin-ho devoted himself into training for some time, because he just liked the fact that he would get stronger. What is it? Why are you snickering? Have you gone mad? Why are you snickering too then? Hey sir. Cordelia approached Jude and sat by his side before she giggled again. Is my Jude stronger now? I have to be strong so that I can protect my princess. Oh my, I'm so proud of you. As a prize, I'll help you up. You'll catch a cold if you sleep in this place. Cordelia shamelessly spoke like Jude before she helped him up and supported him. The smell of sweat. Ahem, I'm sorry. No, it's okay. It was not as bad as she thought. Cordelia walked as she supported Jude, who had unexpectedly grown 10 cm taller than her, and Jude leaned on her as he was out of it for a while. After all, he was tired. And that was why Jude didn't notice it. Cordelia was staring at the side of his face. He's handsome. No, he was rather cool. She could see him covered in sweat, and she roughly breathed too. What's going on? I'm strangely looking at him again and again. I keep thinking that he's cool. My heart keeps pounding. Cordelia. Hung Ye, yes, let's hurry. Cordelia smiled and increased her pace as she diligently moved forward, while Jude tilted his head once but didn't question her anymore. He leaned against Cordelia as they walked together. 2 days later. With Count Chase in the lead, Jude's party left Thunderdoom Fortress. Count HR, Svelga and Lucas came out to see them off, and Jude was able to face Count HR, Svelga after 2 days had passed from that day. I hope that it would help in your paths. He was referring to the Sage King's cross sword that Jude had partly learned. Jude responded with a smile, and Lucas stood in front of him. Mr. Jude. Yes, Lord Lucas. I've began to learn the Sage King's cross sword from my father since yesterday. He was already learning about it, but the idea was different this time. It was beyond the idea of simply learning the family's martial arts, as he had begun his training to become the martial arts official successor. Congratulations. Thank you, and this is presumptuous of me, but I'll definitely catch up. Lucas' face was burning red. Because of his shame. He knew better than anyone else the difference in skill between Jude and himself. Jude looked into Lucas' eyes, and then he smiled. I'll look forward to it. I also want to have a good rival. His words were cringy, and it might have sounded sarcastic in some way, but Jude didn't think so. Jude's words were sincere, and he had nothing more to say than this to boost Lucas' spirit. I'll work harder. Then I'll look forward to it again. Jude and Lucas shook hands, and their farewell ended as Count HR, Svelga happily watched the two. And after their party had travelled quite far, Adelia sat under the tree during their break, and she stared at Cordelia with eyes full of annoyance. What is it? What do you want? Unnai, aren't you overreacting? Because you're interfering with my time with Lord Gar-El, it's difficult for us to have some time alone. You're always together, how is that difficult? What about you? Don't you know that feeling of wanting to see each other even if you can see each other? I've heard that you asked everyone to let the two of you have some time alone, even though you're always together with Jude. No, that is. What do you mean no? You're quite a cheeky little girl. At Adelia's rebuke, Cordelia was speechless and thumped on her chest. No, you're the one who's flirtatious. Unnai, you're the one who's really flirtatious. You were kissing in front of everyone. Tien, the Korean word balanke kajida, can both mean flirtatious and cheeky. Adelia and Cordelia used the word in a way that both meanings can be applied. I'm an adult. You're still a minor, Cordelia. Adelia counterattacked, and Cordelia was left speechless again at her attack that was a fact. By the way, what were you going to say? I have a question. What is it? Are you asking on what it feels like when you kiss? No, it's not. I'm not curious about that at all, okay? Really? I might be a little curious. Anyway, what I'm curious about is something else. Adelia smiled as she saw the blushing Cordelia, who objected. Because it seemed like Cordelia hadn't kissed, yet based on her reaction. Because you're still a child. Your relationship is still wholesome. I'm an adult. Adelia was pleased again before she shrugged once and asked. Okay, what are you curious about then? That. Wn did Unnai know. About what? That brother-in-law Gar-El likes you. Adelia's face turned red at Cordelia's question. Why are you asking? No, I just want to know a bit. The sisters resembled each other as they blushed and fidgeted, and Adelia eventually opened her mouth. Ahem, you see. Yes. That at some point I noticed it, when we looked into each other's eyes. I love this person, and this person loves me too. What, did you just feel it at some point? Yes, at some moment. I can only express it like that. I can't use that as reference, if I do it that way. I mean, there was no such moment when we looked at each other, but that doesn't mean that Jude doesn't like me, right? Is it because of Jude? Oh, yes. How odd, you two are head over heels in love with each other. It's not like that. Come up with an excuse that makes sense. Anyway, perhaps it's because you've been together for so long. Huh? No, I mean, it's become too natural, for the two of you. Is that so? Maybe. Adelia shrugged and stood up as she brushed off the dirt. Now then, I'm going to Lord Gar-El, stay strong too. Adelia giggled with a blushing face as she quickly walked in her happiness to see Gar-El, and Cordelia blinked her eyes. How can a person change that much? Cordelia herself seemed to be somehow a bit embarrassed by her sister's actions these days. Anyway, she looked into his eyes and felt it right. Okay, the eyes. I'll look into his eyes. I'm confident if it's that. Cordelia clenched her fists and stood up from her seat. And 5 days later, the party led by Count Chase finally reached Langersthey. Upon their arrival at Langersthey, the party came to stay at the luxury accommodation they had previously stayed. Go and take some rest. As soon as he unpacked the luggage in his room, Count Chase left the place with Gar-El and Adelia. It was to greet the important people in Langersthey, including Sir Bayua, the Knight Commander of the Order of the Blue Lion that were in charge of the security in Langersthey. Don't cause trouble, okay, do you understand? Okay, we aren't kids, okay? You're a child. You also have a record of running away several times. Cordelia pouted at Adelia's perfect and sudden counterattack that were facts, so she couldn't defend herself, but Jude's situation with Gar-El was slightly different. Please give my regards to him. Yes, I will. Jude and Cordelia were slightly acquainted with Sir Bayua, the Knight Commander of the Order of the Blue Lion. It would originally seem sensible if Jude went too and greeted him together. But, just stay quiet for a while. Yes, brother. Jude and Cordelia were embarrassed to show their faces everywhere due to their midnight love escapade that caused a stir in the entire northern part of the S-Len kingdom. So it was better to be quiet for a while, like Gar-El had said. Don't do anything weird just because the two of you are alone, okay? Do you understand? I understand. Cordelia answered without hiding her slight annoyance, and Adelia smiled before she immediately approached Gar-El and held his arm. Let's go then, Lord Gar-El. Yes, Lady Adelia. Gar-El slightly laughed before he escorted Adelia, and Count Chase quietly watched them before he left with a very small smile. And the two were now left alone. Seriously, I get the chills when I see them looking at each other. Why, they're cute. It's not cute at all, it's my sister and not anyone else, okay? Cordelia frowned, and Jude snickered before he extended his hand to her. What is it? I mean, we have to go too. Now that the two of us are left, we have to settle the work that we've put off. Work that we put off, I mean when it's just the two of us alone. Yes, it's because only the two of us are left, let's go quickly. Jude replied with a smile and grabbed Cordelia's hand as if snatching it, and Cordelia blinked her eyes as her cheeks flushed. What is it? What is it? There's something we have to do since the two of us are alone. Cordelia was now 17 years old, and just like children her age, she was brimming with curiosity and imagination. And that was why she had some unusual delusions in the short period of time when they headed from the lobby on the 1st floor to Jude's room on the 3rd floor. We're here. Wait, my heart isn't ready yet. Cordelia reflexively spoke, but Jude was indifferent as he opened the door. She hesitated but entered the room when Jude pulled her by hand. And around 30 seconds later, Tusk, Cordelia. Cordelia frowned and pouted her lips when Jude asked her. What is this unexplainable feeling of disappointment? No, what I mean is, I had a feeling this would happen. It would have been awkward and difficult if it wasn't. Various items were nicely arranged in a row on the bed in Jude's room. Because settlement and organization are essential. Jude said with glistening eyes, and Cordelia sighed before nodding. Fine, let's organize everything together. Okay, first of all, I arranged the items we used a lot. Jude said with a bright face, as if he was someone who originally liked to organize items like this, and he pointed to the object on the far left of the bed. First is moonlight. I've removed the Snow Queen's core, but Melissa is still there. It's still enough for you to use as your primary weapon. But we still need to upgrade it once, right? It will be possible once we get to the royal capital. If we participate in Medibee's auction house, we'll be able to get better items. Medibee's auction house was the largest auction house located in the royal capital of the Len Kingdom. It was a must to stop by at that place when one goes to the royal capital, because there were various subquests available there. Next is the Heavenly Judgment. Yes, I thought about giving it to Lena, but we also need a trump card. Cordelia had just become a 9th rank angel, so she could not draw out the full power of the Heavenly Judgment. But it was too precious to hand it over to Lena. You just need to raise your rank, my princess. Work hard, okay? Yes, Daddy, just give me lots of pocket money. Cordelia replied before looking at the Eastern Warrior's sword that was lying next to the Heavenly Judgment. Jude, will you go the swordsmanship route? I'll think about it when we return home. Jude was thinking of changing his job from barehanded fighter to knight, but he changed his mind again after opening the 4th door of the 9th Heaven's 9 doors. The power of the 9th Heaven's 9 doors could be placed in everything under the heavens and earth, but the most natural way to unleash its power was the fist and leg techniques with a pure body as its foundation. But I have no intention of giving up this sword. I can use it for its killer technique. Well, that's true. After all, the lethal skill of the Eastern Warrior's sword, Hell's Blood Slash, felt like shooting a pistol. Because there are many swords with built-in lethal moves. He had enough reasons to carry the sword, even if he didn't use it as his main weapon. Cordelia herself didn't use a sword, but she still carried the Heavenly Judgment. Then your main weapon is the gauntlet. It will be for the time being. The gauntlet he obtained from Frost Anvil was remodeled by the blacksmiths in the Wild Lands. It also contained the power of the wild gods, so it could be used as his main weapon for a while. I think I'll change this once I go to the royal capital. He felt a little sorry for the wild gods, but he couldn't help it. One of the pleasures of playing RPG was to change to the highest level equipment every time one went to a new town. We can use the divine items of the wild gods for a long time in the future, right? Because they're highly useful tools. Blade Song's divine items, the Cozy Wonpyeong and the Black Wolf Skin. Great Storm's divine item, the Wind's Wing Arrow. As Jude had said, these items were highly useful and would be helpful even if they became stronger than they were now. Next is... Cordelia smiled and turned her gaze to the side before her eyes suddenly narrowed. Jude coughed and feigned ignorance. Hey, Mr. Jude. Yes, Miss Cordelia. What is this? It's useful equipment. Cordelia's eyes grew even narrower, and Jude's coughing increased a bit. The rabbit set and cat set were boldly placed among the items that they needed to take in the future. There were no problems in wearing it in the Wild Lands, since many people wore similar equipment there, but wearing it in the Len Kingdom was actually courageous in itself. Are you telling me to wear this? No, but wouldn't it be useful someday if you had it? Jude took a peek at Cordelia's face, and Cordelia quietly stared at Jude with almost closed eyes now. A few seconds passed like that. Ahem, let's move on to the next. Jude coughed again and pointed to the items placed next to the rabbit and cat sets. Magellan's ancient artifacts that we got from the wild fairies are for enhancing the power of attributes, so it would be better to carry everything with you even if it's a little uncomfortable. Ahem. Cordelia's gaze was still on the rabbit set, and Jude hastily pointed to the things next to him. The next are the items your father gave to me. Most of them are for me to consume, but Cordelia, there are items that may help you, so I arranged them here first. Numerous drugs filled half of the spacious bed. Most of them were items to increase Jude's physical strength. But Cordelia didn't highly desire any of it. But there was only one that bothered her. Why isn't that here? Huh. I mean, you know, what my dad gave to you last time, what he gave you to eat later. Cordelia spoke while her hands moved and drew the shape of a box, and Jude unconsciously flinched and cleared his throat as he said, Ahem, ahem, I'll eat it later, as your father had said. What was that? Ahem, ahem, it's that kind of drug. Kids don't need to know about it. Hey, aren't you a kid too? You and I are of the same age. I can't because you can't even guess it at this point. I'll tell you later. Having said so far, Jude tightly shut his mouth, and Cordelia puffed her cheeks in dissatisfaction, but didn't pry any further. She knew well that once he shut his mouth in that way, he wouldn't open it no matter what. Tusk, 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 anyway, are these all the items? Yes, there are some trivial stuff, but they're not something that we'll continue to use in the future. These are all we need to take when we go to the royal capital. Then we should prepare some defensive armor first, even if it's not armor. It can't be helped. Light armor suits you and me rather than heavy armor, so we should try to get it once we arrive there. Since Count Chase joined them, Jude and Cordelia were wearing clothes that were appropriate for a noble young master and lady. It looked good but was uncomfortable, and the clothes didn't even have any defensive features. Okay, let's move on to checking our abilities. Do you remember our levels? Of course, I'm 71, you're 70. Cordelia grinned and even flashed a V-sign with her fingers, and Jude clicked his tongue as he said, Do you like it? Yes, you're tilde not good. After all, she beat Jude, or outboxer 009. Yes, I'm so good, I'll reverse it soon. Tien, these two love their puns. Like and good are the same word in Korean. On the other hand, mu can mean not and so, thus, not good can also be read as so good. What are you talking about? Your level is lower than mine. Can't you hear my words well because you're a low-level loser? Cordelia trembled her shoulders in excitement, and Jude clenched his teeth. He remembered the day when he first met Yellow Storm. Moving on. Yes, moving on. Cordelia agreed to change the topic as if she was being merciful, and Jude sighed before speaking. If we add up all the titles we've obtained so far, our stats almost reached around level 80. And because I have 9th Heaven's 9 doors while you can become a witch and an angel, you could say that we're actually in the mid-80s or higher. If you considered Cordelia's route, her average level at the beginning of the Royal Capital event was usually in the early to middle 40s. My level is so high now, right? You're right, moreover, it's even more amazing that we've reached this far before the event started. There was originally a time difference of half a year between the beginning of the Cordelia route and the Jude route. Since both Jude and Cordelia were rotten water, they didn't find it necessary to talk about it with each other, but the events of the game were perfectly arranged in chronological order inside their minds. The time when we recovered the memories of our previous lives was almost the same time as the starting point of the Cordelia route, so if I use that as a standard. The starting point of the Cordelia route was 0. The Northern Barbarians' invasion began about half a year from 0. The 300th anniversary ball, which could be considered as the beginning of the Royal Capital event, was also held about half a year from 0. But no matter how the player proceeded in the routes, the 300th anniversary ball was slightly ahead of the Northern Barbarians' invasion. And now we are currently about 3 months from 0. In other words, there were still 3 months left until the 300th anniversary ball. Should we go straight to the Royal Capital? At Cordelia's question, Jude shook his head. No, it would be nice if we went ahead and prepared, but it's too early. We have no justification for going to the Royal Capital at this moment, and even if we hastened our traveling schedule, arriving a month before the founding ball in the Royal Capital will be enough time for us. So we won't do anything for 2 months. When Cordelia asked in surprise, Jude shook his head again. No, that's not right, because time is gold. So after we do our own training for 1 month and prepare this and that, we'll go to the Royal Capital. After a month of training and another month for our travel to the Royal Capital, we'll begin the quest, is that right? That's right. Both Jude and Cordelia had rapidly become stronger in the wild lands, so they needed time to completely get used to their newly acquired powers. In the game, one just leveled up and they were done with mastering their powers, but this place was reality. What are you preparing for apart from training? What are you planning to do? At Cordelia's question, Jude had a wicked expression and a creepy smile as if he was waiting for her to ask that question. Ha ha ha, should I say that it's the secret to stealing the hearts of the people in the Royal Capital? Don't laugh like that because it's disgusting. You're like a scammer. Yes, madam. Jude quickly corrected his expression, and Cordelia asked as she sat down on the bed. Steal their hearts, what are you talking about? Even if we are children of the 12 northern families, we'll still be treated like little kids from the countryside when we go to the royal capital. And as you know, we can't proceed with the royal capital event by just beating and forcing our way through. But isn't that possible now? Our levels are high. No, that's not it. You should know that force alone cannot solve the event. In the first place, there are enemies there who are much stronger than us now. It was not a place like a snowfield where the uninhabited land was many times larger than the habitable land, just like in the wild lands. The royal capital. The capital of the Len Kingdom, one of the continent's strongest powers. It was swarming with strong people, and there were those who possessed great power apart from pure strength. It's not just about force alone, we need to play politics to some extent. One of the enemies was Duke Antarius, the Minister of Defense and one of the 10 great swordmasters. So there was a limit to breaking through with just force. Of course, we'll be using force in the end. The main enemies of the Royal Road event were the Devil's Hand and the corrupted high-ranking nobles. In order to deal with them, in order to lead the political landscape of the royal capital, it was necessary for them to be greatly influential just as how they were powerful. Okay, so what are you preparing for in the end? I'll try it first and tell you if it goes well. I'll be needing your help anyway. Really? Don't make me curious and just tell me. Later. Jude tightly shut his mouth again, and Cordelia stamped her feet in annoyance as she knew that he wouldn't tell it to her again. Okay, is everything over then? Almost, there's one last thing left. The last one. Cordelia's eyes sparkled from curiosity. Jude, are you in there? Jude and Cordelia were startled and turned to the balcony where they heard the voice, because it was Count Chase's voice. Father. Dad. Jude and Cordelia hurried to the balcony and opened the door, and Count Chase stood there with his red cloak and stern face as he slightly frowned. Were you two together? Yes, we were organizing our luggage together, the ones that we brought from the wild lands. Cordelia replied, and Count Chase glanced over the bed behind the two before he relaxed his expression and said, I see. Anyway, Jude, this is something new but is quite small. Take it. Ah, yes. Jude quickly extended his hands and accepted the leather pouch. It's not much, but it will help, and keep this a secret from Adelia, okay? At his slightly lowered voice than usual, Jude and Cordelia blinked once but soon understood it. Because they figured out why a person who went out to greet people suddenly came back and why he appeared through the balcony rather than the door. Hehe, my dad is the best. Cordelia hugged his arm as she widely smiled, and Count Chase smiled for a very short time before he cleared his throat and spoke again. I will go now. Yes, please take care. See you later, Dad. When Jude bowed his head and Cordelia waved her hand, Count Chase glanced at the greetings of the two before he flew back into the air and left the balcony. He's a very nice person. HMPH, it's to be expected as brother-in-law Gar-El is already big. It's proper to take care of my Jude first. Cordelia smiled at her unexpected victory before she turned to Jude again. So what is it? Growing drug. It's a medicine that makes you grow 1 cm when eaten. Oh, wasn't it the best item that was ranked third, in reality? That's right. Jude cheerfully smiled and kept the pouch before he returned inside the room with Cordelia. Well, it's good. Now, if we sneak out at night to go meet the fall fairies in order to get the fall protection. I feel like I've gotten so used to getting away at night. It's not an escape at night this time, but just a short night walk. You have a way with words. Anyway, what's the last? I mean, you said that there's one last left. Oh, that. Jude suddenly grinned as if it was on purpose, and he took Cordelia's hand and whispered to her. Close your eyes for a minute. My eyes, why? Close it first, don't you trust me? What is he planning? Cordelia was suspicious, but she closed her eyes and Jude led her to a small room that was attached to his large room. You can open your eyes now. He said it was the last one, so was it a surprise present? Cordelia's heart slightly palpitated as she gently opened her eyes, but she soon frowned. What is this? There were only a few bundles of black cords that were rolled up like a thread on the table. It was an item she had never seen before in Legend of Heroes 2. But her reaction was to be expected. It was an object that didn't originally exist in Legend of Heroes 2, or in the world of Pleiades. Detonating cord. Jude said, and Cordelia blinked her eyes. Detonating cord. Detonating cord. But Cordelia still blinked her eyes, because it was the first time she had heard of that name. What is that? She didn't exactly know what it was, but the name somehow made her heart pound. So Jude gave Cordelia a short but full explanation. It's a cord that explodes. Detonating cord. As its name implied, it was an explosive that was shaped into the form of a tape or cord. It was something that he made little by little in the remaining time after their battle on Snow Breeze Plain. It's still a prototype. He was thinking of making something more proper when he returned home. It will have plenty of uses if Cordelia uses her telekinetic power to cause an explosion anytime and anywhere. Since she always boasted that she was good at anything she did with her body, it would be possible for her to use the detonating cord as if it was her hands and feet. Will she like it? Jude looked at Cordelia, and Cordelia gazed at the detonating cord with a blank expression, but her blue eyes were soon filled with ecstasy. Detonating cord. Cordelia trembled and soon turned to Jude. She jumped up and hugged Jude. I love it, my Jude is the best. Jude was slightly anxious at the ecstasy that spread over Cordelia's eyes, but he eventually smiled. He strengthened his hug and enjoyed Cordelia's embrace for some time. The meeting between the detonating cord and Cordelia. It was the moment when the explosion witch was born, one that would shake the entire Len kingdom in the future. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story.